Thousands of miles from land.
You're gonna die all alone in the middle of the ocean. I've no hope anymore.
For an incredible 76 days, he battles the sea.
Whether the shark eats me or not, I'm done.
Extreme hunger.
Your body starts eating its own muscle.
And his own mind.
Psychologically, mentally, I was just done.
In an epic fight to stay alive.
I just felt like I was totally doomed.
29-year-old Bostonian Steve Callahan is halfway through the sailing trip of a lifetime.
I remember the first time I went out sailing. I loved the immediacy of it. You can go off and have an adventure.
He's already sailed from the USA to the Canary Islands and is now heading off on the 3,500-mile return leg back across the Atlantic to the Caribbean.
I figured on the very outside it would be a month to get to the Caribbean, but I'd probably make it a few weeks.
For Steve, the trip is an adventure and also a means of escape.
My life was in a bit of a shambles. My marriage had gone south and we had split up. There I was, ready for a new stage of my life.
Steve is hoping that isolation in the open seas in his self-built boat will help him leave a difficult year behind.
I was really on my own out there, which was fine. I didn't need people. I didn't really need the society so much. I pictured myself more as like a sea creature.
In Steve's first week at sea, weather conditions could hardly be better.
When I left the Canary Islands for a week, I had just the most idyllic sail. Everything was just beautiful, and I would listen to my radio and play the boat like a drum. Do my exercise. I had this whole exercise routine on the boat. It just felt completely at home there.
But 800 miles and 1 week out into the mid-Atlantic, the weather begins to change.
The weather just started turning dirty. It was probably blowing 35 or so knots. And the waves started growing.
For an experienced sailor like Steve, it's nothing out of the ordinary.
I'd seen a lot worse weather before. And so I figured, well, it'll probably be a day or two and this will speed by. I wasn't worried. Everything was fine.
As night falls and the rough weather continues, Steve switches on the autopilot and beds down for the night.
People think that sailing is a very quiet undertaking. It's not. Big waves are slamming against the side of the boat. do get this quite jerky motion, but I was still able to kind of lie down, and I was kind of half asleep. All of a sudden, there was this big bang on the side of the boat. There was just this huge flood of water immediately.
Steve has no idea what he's hit, but the boat's hull has been torn apart.
The water was rising very, very quickly.
Within seconds, the water is above his head.
I just thought, this boat is going to be underwater. I'm going right to the bottom.
Steve's boat is sinking. He knows he has seconds to get to the life raft up on deck.
So I yank on the line, and the line keeps coming out. No, nothing. This didn't work at all. Finally, boom, it pops open.
Steve makes it to safety, but just as he's about to cut himself loose, a terrifying thought hits him.
With the equipment that's in the raft, I will not last very long at all.
Everything he needs to have any chance of survival is stowed deep inside the flooded boat.
It was essential that I go back on the boat and dive down and get equipment. Even though I realized that the boat could slip under the waves at any moment.
Against every instinct, he knows he has no option but to dive back down to the sinking boat.
Though it's all dark in there, so I couldn't really see anything. I could feel the ditch pit. It was tied down. And I started cutting away.
Steve frees his emergency supply kit. But just as he makes it to the exit hatch,
Slammed closed. The boat's covered with water. I'm going down. I thought that was it. If I don't get out of here right now, I am going to die. There's 100% certainty of that.
but just as Steve's lungs are about to burst, a huge wave breaks across the boat.
All of a sudden there's air. It was a huge, huge relief.
With only seconds to spare, Steve escapes, clutching his vital emergency supplies.
I jumped into the raft and I saw that I was drifting away from the boat.
Steve can only watch as he drifts away from not just his boat, but also his dream.
I went drifting off into the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It just was kind of devastating. That first night in it blew hard, really cold and really wet and really scary.
I was shivering a lot, and I was worried about dying of hypothermia. I might not make it till the morning.
Dawn breaks to reveal the true horror of Steve's situation. His boat is gone, and he is alone in the Atlantic.
I'm a long way away from anybody, and I'm in a very empty part of the ocean as well. I am just this teeny little thing, surrounded by this immensity of sea. It was kind of overpowering.
Steve has no means of communication and knows that no one will be looking for him.
I told people at home, I gave them 5 or 6 weeks after I left the Canary Islands as being, don't worry about me if I don't show up this time.
Steve calculates he's 1,000 miles from land and completely at the mercy of wind and currents as they push him further westwards, out into the ocean.
I was in a place where there was basically no shipping, and I really needed to get to the shipping lanes to have any chance of being picked up at all.
Steve estimates that the shipping lanes are 350 miles further west. But even if the winds still push him in the same direction, it will take him at least 2 weeks to get there. And he only has a tiny supply of emergency drinking water.
I was worried. I had 8 pints of water, which theoretically was good enough for maybe 8 days.
Without enough water, he has almost no chance of making the shipping lanes alive.
It's a great irony that the world's biggest desert actually is the ocean. You can't drink any of the water there, there's no shade, and my chances of survival were almost hopeless.
Along with a harpoon and a few other supplies he rescued from his boat, Steve discovers 3 emergency water purification kits, known as solar stills.
The solar stills that I had were created during the Second World War for downed pilots. I never knew anybody who had actually used them before. I got 8 pints of water. It's over 2 weeks before I reached the shipping lane. So the solar stills were absolutely critical to any long-term survival.
Steve fills the still with seawater, knowing that the heat of the sun should separate the salt from the water.
I'd have, half hour, I've got a whole bag of water. I kept trying them again and again and again.
Steve cannot figure out how the solar stills work.
It's seawater, it was just seawater, it just didn't work at all.
And now he faces his first full night adrift in the ocean.
I was desperately lonesome, and there was no part of this that was not kind of a hellish experience.
Steve knows that it's essential he solves his drinking water problem, and the storm gives him an idea.
I knew that most survivors would rely on collecting rainwater.
If Steve can use the raft's canopy to collect rainwater, he may have hit upon an answer.
It was pretty much like drinking somebody's vomit. It was just so awful, it was undrinkable.
The orange pigment from the canopy contaminates the water.
I decided I'm never going to drink the water off the canopy. It was just too dangerous.
Steve's quest to find solace out at sea has resulted in horrific isolation, and he can see no way out of his ordeal.
I wrote my own epitaph that day. My name is Stephen Callahan. I was shipwrecked at approximately this position. I am drifting in a 6-man raft. I'm doomed. I just felt like I was totally doomed.
The currents are pushing Steve westwards, towards the shipping lanes, his only chance of rescue. But he's over 2 weeks away, with only enough water to last him a few days.
It wasn't going to keep me alive very long. You know, I'm taking a little sip every now and then, hardly even swallowing it, really. It's just being more absorbed. I'm getting really thirsty.
Steve ekes out his supplies for a whole week, but knows his only hope
Of the
is
solar stillness.
But
But first he must understand what he's doing wrong.
It was critical to figure out how to use these things. Just like go back to square one and try to figure out how does this thing actually work.
It's a drastic step, but he decides to rip one of his 3 precious stills apart, in the hope that he can work out how to make them produce fresh water.
And I finally dawned on me, it had to be inflated just the right amount. Get the solar still to produce, I'm talking a spoonful of fresh water was like the hugest high I could possibly have.
Steve now has a tiny supply of water, but after 7 days at sea, he faces yet another problem. He's run out of food.
I was really hungry, just like really struck me how desperate I had become. There's no way I'm gonna live out here.
But just as Steve is beginning to think that the ocean is bereft of life,
immediately my heart kind of jumped in my throat. There are fish here. I knew right away that if I'm fishing with a spear in an inflated raft, I'm taking a big chance here. I kept trying and nothing would work. I just couldn't spear one. It was very frustrating.
Steve spends the whole day trying to catch fish. But just as he thinks he may finally succeed, the firing mechanism on his spear gun breaks.
Now, I don't have a range of 6 feet, possibly. I have a range of about 18 inches. I was really hungry. It just really struck me how desperate I had become at that point.
For days, Steve continues to try and catch fish, but to no avail.